How's it going, everybody? So this is another episode of Bobby's Book Review, which hasn't happened in a while, I will say. Usually it takes me a short order to get books that are not very big finished. I've been busy with a few things, so it's taken a while. But the second book is a follow-up to a book I've read. This author you've heard before, Tass, the author of Once an Arafat Man. This is a review of his second book, The Mind of Terror. This is a book which I've read once before, but I had to go back and read it again after reading his autobiography. And The Mind of Terror, to me, is a book that everybody needs to read. I do not care where you're at or where you're from. You need to read this book, along with his autobiography. Read his autobiography first, because that'll help make some sense for this book as well. I will tell you that, first of all, this book was published in 2016, to give some time of when it was published. At the time, there was a lot of stuff going on with ISIS and such. Not as much anymore, but there's still a matter of what's going on with the Taliban in Afghanistan and what have you. I would say this book is still very much needed. And also along with what just happened with Lebanon and Israel and what happened in the last situation with regards to the Iron Dome. Couple things that this book talks about, and I want to make sure that these are clearly understood. First off, there are 4 different parts, as it were, to this book with regards to what it talks about. Part 1 is Inside the Terrorist Mindset, where there's no place to hide, honor and shame, a different way to think. That's Chapter 2. Chapter 3 is What Makes a Terrorist, and Chapter 4 is Deep Roots. Now, pardon me. People have to understand something right off the jump, and Tass explains this from his own personal testimony in his first book. Contrary to the myth and popular belief here in the West, not everybody becomes a terrorist for the same reason. Unfortunately, a lot of people think that, again, according to common belief or myth, that everybody who is a Muslim who lives in the Middle East is indoctrinated. Not true. Not true. Not everybody who is a terrorist or becomes a terrorist does so, according to this book, by the same means of indoctrination. Some do it because they've seen other family members killed. Some do it because they are indoctrinated. Some do it because they've had a rough go of things in their life for whatever reason. And also he points out that not everybody in the West Bank or the Gaza Strip who is a Palestinian is a Muslim. There are, in fact, Palestinian Christians in both Gaza and the West Bank. That is another thing that people need to understand. Not everybody who lives in the Middle East is a Muslim. There are Christians and there are Jews outside of Israel and other parts of the Middle East. That's another thing to understand. Also, honor and shame is a different way to think in the Middle East than it is here. Here, again, as in the first book, as I gave an understanding with his first book and his autobiography and his testimony, here in Western culture, people think in individualism, although there is some groupthink of late, but generally speaking, in Western societies, whether it's in Europe or here or Canada, there's a matter of individual personalities and individual lives, and a matter of guilt versus innocence. However, in the Middle East, it's about honor and shame, and not just for the individual, but for that individual's family, and to some extent, their neighborhood as well, sometimes their country, depending on the situation of this individual. In terms of now what, which is in part 2, it talks about, we can either worry, we continue to be in a state of concern because of things that have happened over the past 20 years since 9/11, which 20th anniversary of that is coming up, by the way. We can fight back, but the reality is, and mind you, I speak as a veteran, as someone who did 3.5 years, 2 tours, one of which included Operation Iraqi Freedom. And I'm going to tell y'all, war is hell, war is ugly, and at some point, war can fatigue people. But it's not going to solve everything. Okay? I'm not saying we shouldn't have a military. I'm not saying that we in the West should not defend ourselves. But what I am saying is that war is really politics by another means, to quote somebody else. And, you know, while I am proud to have served, I'm also realistic about the fact that war was never meant to be permanent. War was never meant to be long-standing, historically speaking. We can wish for solutions that will never happen. In chapter 7, again, he says something here that's a hot take that flies in the face of conventional thinking with regards to, in particular, the Israeli-Palestinian situation. And that is, there's never going to be two states. The two-state solution is he makes a point of saying we're past that point. And other authors have said as much on both sides, and there are people who are not even Jewish nor Palestinian that have also said we're past that. We're past the two-state solution at this point. Does that mean that Palestinians don't have a right to live in the Holy Land? No. But it's not that simple. Does it mean Israelis don't have a right to live in the Holy Land? No. But again, political solutions are not going to work. They're just not. That's being realistic. It's a hard pill to swallow. It's a bitter pill to swallow. But that's reality. We can chalk it up to end-time prophecy. And who can argue with the way things are in the world right now that we're not living in a very tense situation all around the globe because of all that's going on? But just because we may be living in quote-unquote the end times does not mean that we should put aside the Great Commission to make disciples and to preach the good news and to live out what Jesus taught us, which leads into part 3 of Tass's book. There's a better way. And it's understanding God's plans not just for Isaac, but also for Ishmael, because Ishmael was not cursed. If you go back and read the Genesis account, and Tass points this out, that Ishmael was actually blessed, not cursed. And we have to keep that in consideration. There's the mind of peace, and that peacemaking is not just a speech that we speak, but a life that we live. And peace is something to be pursued, not just spoken of. The winning the right to be heard. You can't just go in and force your beliefs on people. It doesn't work that way. You have to earn the right to be speak, and you have to be willing to listen more. Like, really listen. Not just hear someone speak, but actually listening to what they're saying in the full context. What you can do to neutralize terrorism. This, to me, this particular chapter in part 3, which speaks of a better way, is vastly important if we're going to get anywhere with regards to neutralizing that mindset either abroad or here at the States. Is the Jesus way realistic? Short answer, yes. Yes, it is. Jesus, better known in Hebrew by his actual name, Yeshua or Yehoshua, or in Arabic as Yahshua al-Masih, it is realistic. And there are silver linings, which he speaks about as well. Not only that, but in the, what he calls the bonus section, which is Everyday Heroes, Peacemakers at Works, you have Nurturing Tomorrow's Leaders in part A, you have Agents of Change in part B, and you have Softening Adult Hearts in part C. Part of that, and I recommend, if you have not heard of these organizations, whether it's Hope for Ishmael, Seeds of Hope, or Little Hearts being a preschool daycare spot in Jerusalem, Seeds of Hope being a school in Jericho, and Hope for Ishmael, which is Saada's organization. If you have not looked these organizations up, please do so, and please prayerfully consider supporting these ministries, these schools, and Hope, as well as the overall organization Hope for Ishmael. If you haven't done that, I would strongly recommend it, because that organization is doing a lot to bring peace, not just overseas, but here at home. And it's a strong one we would be worth considering. So if you can do that, please do so. I will tell you plainly, I've read this book. I've read his first book. And I will tell you, plainly, these are schools, Seeds of Hope, and Little Hearts, as well as Hope for Ishmael. These are ministries worth considering. Please. Especially in times that we live today. They can go a long way. They can help so much. Read this book in tandem with his other book, Mind of Terror. I strongly recommend it, and I strongly recommend you seeking out his organizations. If you ask me for a link, or if you ask Tass, if you seek him out, I'm sure he'd be willing to talk to you about his ministry. And please, again, prayerfully consider donating, supporting this, because it goes a long way in bringing the Lord's peace, and not just in words, but in deeds. You know, because Jesus talks about, let your light so shine. Don't hide it under a basket, but put it on a lampstand to show that people may see your good works and glorify your Father which is in heaven. Tass has done this in his books, in his ministries, and I encourage you to support him and to read this book. I don't know really how much more I can give, because I don't want to give the whole book away. I want you to read it for yourself, consider it, soak in what it has to say, and keep it in mind. This is Bobby G, aka Bobby Bookworm, or Robert is my first government name, as some of you may guess at this point. This is my book review. Hopefully y'all consider reading it and consider supporting these ministries. Peace.